People always ask me what I do for a living. I tell them I'm a chef, which isn't technically a lie. I just leave out the part where my kitchen is in the middle of a forest. My recipe could get me life in prison, and my boss once made a guy vanish because he sneezed near the product. I was a cartel cook, the invisible nobody that everyone ignores. And for a while, everything was great. The money was good, keep your head down, stir the barrel, go home breathing. But everyone has a switch, a line you cross and there's no coming back. They found mine, so I didn't leave. I did something much, much worse. Let me back up. I grew up in a town so small, the most exciting thing that ever happened was a cow walking into church during Sunday Mass. No jobs, no future. Just dust and the slow understanding that if you stayed, you'd rot. I was 19, broke, watching my mother work herself to death in a house where the roof turned every rainstorm into an indoor pool. Then a cousin of a cousin mentioned work in the hills. Good money, simple instructions, no questions. When your mother needs medicine and your ceiling is caving in, your moral compass gets real flexible, real fast. First day, truck before sunrise. Hour drive into nowhere. I'm expecting a warehouse. Instead, I get a clearing in the woods with plastic barrels, a generator, and a guy with a machete who points at a barrel and says one word, stir. That was my entire onboarding. My protective equipment was a bandana and the hope that wind existed. But here's the thing, I was good at it. Not because I was smart, because I was terrified. When the penalty for messing up is a shallow grave, you pay attention to every detail. After my first cook, a man handed me a plastic bag with more cash than I'd ever held. I fixed my mother's roof, bought her a new stove. She asked where the money came from. I said, construction. She didn't believe me. She didn't ask again. Within months, I was their most reliable cook. Life was good. Or at least the version of good you convince yourself of when you're trying not to think about what you're actually doing. Then, things changed. They moved me to a bigger operation, real equipment, multiple cook teams, armed guards, schedules, quotas. I'd gone from freelancer to full-time employee of the worst company on earth. The kind where your performance review determines whether you keep your kneecaps. I learned the rules fast. Don't use a real phone. Don't tell anyone, not your mom, not your girl, not your priest. Don't be late. Don't skim product. And don't ask what happened to the last cook who had your job. Then I met the boss. Not in some mansion, in a random farmhouse, eating lunch like a Sunday barbecue, surrounded by men with rifles who looked at me the way you look at a vending machine. Useful, but not interesting. The boss was calm, polite, almost charming. He asked about my family, my mother. He knew her name, knew the street she lived on, even mentioned the new stove, and he smiled when he said it. That smile still sits behind my eyes. It wasn't friendly. It was a receipt. He was letting me know he knew exactly what I cared about. And in this world, caring about something is a vulnerability. He told me I was valuable, that valuable people are protected. My family was safe, as long as everyone stayed happy. I walked out understanding something I should have realized long ago. I didn't work for the cartel. The cartel owned me, and everyone I loved. Then, a shipment got intercepted. Product lost. Lots of it. When a cartel loses money, the heat rolls downhill, all the way to the guy stirring the barrel. They brought me in. No beating, no yelling. That would have been easier. The boss sat across from me, calm as ever, and said if there were any more problems, my mother would be relocated. He said it like he was offering to help her move apartments, casual, like a favor. Then he leaned forward and started listing things no stranger should know. The bakery she visits every morning, the time she leaves the house, the neighbor's kid who walks her home on Thursdays when it gets dark, the color of the dress she wears to church. He wasn't guessing. He had people watching her, documenting her. This whole time, while I was stirring barrels and collecting cash, they'd been building a file on the only person I'd ever loved. He sat back, folded his hands, and asked if I understood. I said yes. He smiled, that same smile. I drove home and sat outside my mother's house for 3 hours, staring at the blue gate I painted when I was 14, the gate she walks through every morning, watching her shadow move behind the curtains, completely unaware that someone had turned her daily routine into a list of leverage. And I realized, as long as these people existed, that gate, that house, that woman, none of it was safe, was never going to be safe. Something shifted that night. Not rage, Rage is loud and stupid and gets you killed. This was quieter, colder, like a door closing in my chest that would never open again. For the first time in 3 years, I stopped looking at the chemicals as product. I started seeing them for what they really were. Here's what the cartel never considered. They spent millions on guns, armored trucks, soldiers, bribes, but every week, they handed the quiet guy in the corner barrels full of compounds most people can't pronounce, and never once worried about him. 3 years of mixing volatile substances in the dark taught me things their own suppliers didn't know. Which combinations burn clean, which create fumes that drop a man in 30 seconds, and which ones, in the right ratio, become something no one would see coming. I started collecting, slowly, small amounts from each batch. Nothing anyone would notice. Operations lose product all the time, through spillage and evaporation. I stored everything separately, different containers, different locations, never together. Because putting them together was the one thing I wasn't ready for yet. Then, the moment came. Word spread through the cook teams. A full sit-down. The boss and every top lieutenant in one location. This never happened. These men were paranoid. They never gathered because that's how organizations get destroyed. One raid, one tip-off, and the whole thing crumbles. But rival operations were pushing in. Shipments getting hit. Rumors of a rat. They needed to meet face-to-face, and the location they chose was a farmhouse in the hills. The same farmhouse where the boss smiled at me and said my mother's name. And here's the part that stopped my heart. They needed a batch prepared at the property before the meeting. Someone to go in early, set up the equipment, have everything ready. They sent me. I was going to be alone in that building hours before every person who controlled my life walked through the door, with full access to the supplies, with everything I needed already in my trunk. The drive was the longest hour of my life, knuckles white on the wheel. The plan was simple. That was the point. Something that looked like an accident. Cook sites had accidents all the time. Labs caught fire, fumes leaked. Nobody would question a chemical leak at an active property. I got there midday, farmhouse empty, set up the cook like I'd done 1,000 times. Normal, routine. Guards outside didn't even watch. Why would they? I was the cook. I was furniture. While running the regular setup, I worked with the compounds I'd brought. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped a container. Twice. The second time, it slipped to the edge of my fingers, and I caught it with my other hand so hard, I bruised my palm. One fraction of a second slower, and the thing shatters on concrete. Reaction starts. I'm dead before I can blink, and this story doesn't exist. But I caught it. Barely. I placed everything connected to the ventilation, rigged to the generator's timer. When it kicked into its second cycle, always about 2 hours in, the compounds would combine, heat, and release, colorless, nearly odorless, until too late. In a closed room with windows shut for secrecy like they always were, anyone inside would have minutes before they realized something was wrong. By then, minutes wouldn't matter. Finished. Checked everything twice. Walked out, told the guards the batch was prepped and would be ready by tonight. They nodded without looking at me. Got in the truck, started driving. 40 minutes down the road, my phone rang. My blood went cold. One of the boss's men. There'd been a change of plans. They wanted me at the farmhouse during the meeting, on site in case they needed a second batch immediately. He said it like he was asking me to pick up groceries. I pulled over, vision blurry. Everything I'd rigged was timed to the generator. No remote shutoff, no way to disarm it. If I went back, I'd be in that room when it kicked in, breathing the same air as everyone else. The same air I designed to kill them. 30 seconds to decide. I said no. Told him I was sick. Fumes from the setup. It happens, every cook knows that. Needed to go home, sleep it off. Could come back in the morning. There was a pause on the line that felt like it lasted a year. I could hear him breathing, thinking, deciding whether to believe me or tell me it wasn't a request. Then, fine. But his voice had an edge. The kind of edge that means this conversation isn't over. It's just being saved for later. I hung up and sat on the side of that road for 10 minutes, hands trembling, running through every scenario. If they sent someone to check the setup, if the boss arrived early and noticed something off, if one of the guards mentioned I looked nervous, any one thread pulled and the whole thing unravels back to me. That night, I didn't sleep. Sat on my bathroom floor, staring at the wall. Waiting for the phone to buzz. Waiting for the blacked out truck to appear outside. Every dog bark, every engine sound in the street made my chest lock up. At one point, around 2 a.m., A car pulled onto my street and slowed down near my house. I stopped breathing. Just sat there, completely still, listening to the engine idle. Then it drove off. Probably a neighbor coming home late. Probably. I sat there for the rest of the night with my back against the wall, running exit plans that didn't exist, trying to figure out what country I'd run to if the sun came up and things went wrong. What came instead was silence. By morning, word reached me through another cook. An accident at the farmhouse. Chemical leak during a cook gone wrong. Ventilation failed. Everyone inside? Gone. The boss, his top 3 lieutenants, 2 enforcers, all of them. The property was already being written off as a tragic accident, because that's exactly what it looked like. Nobody suspected the cook. Nobody ever suspects the cook. I didn't feel relief, didn't feel victory. I felt nothing. And that scared me more than anything the cartel ever did. When the top of an organization vanishes overnight, it doesn't collapse. It panics. The supply chain was still there, cook teams still there, routes, buyers, money, all intact. But nobody knew who was in charge. The muscle didn't understand the product. Logistics knew routes, but not recipes. Enforcers could scare people, but couldn't answer the only question that mattered. Who keeps the money flowing? That's when people started coming to me. Not because I asked. Because I was the only one left who understood the full operation. Recipes, suppliers, cook teams, every step, every weak point. And most importantly, I was still breathing. A driver asked what to do with the next shipment. I told him. A cook team leader asked about the schedule. I gave him one. Then, an enforcer showed up. Twice my size, scars on his knuckles, and asked who he should take orders from now. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, me. I didn't take over the cartel. The cartel defaulted to me. Like a company where the CEO vanishes, and the only one who knows all the passwords is the IT guy nobody ever noticed. It's been a while since that night. I don't touch barrels anymore. Other people do that. I moved my mother to a new house, better neighborhood, a gate that's painted and guarded. She doesn't know where the money comes from. Or maybe she does and doesn't ask. Mothers are smart like that. I tell myself I'm different from the man I replaced. Less fear, less threats. I tell myself that every night. And most nights I believe it. But last week, one of my cooks skimmed product. Small amount, barely noticeable. And I handled it the exact same way my old boss would have. I didn't hesitate. People ask if I'm the villain of this story. Honestly, I don't know anymore. But my mother's roof doesn't leak, nobody threatens my family, and for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid. So you tell me, is that winning? Or is that how every monster starts? Honestly, if you were in my shoes, standing in that room with the chemicals and one chance to protect your family, would you have done it? Tell me in the comments. And if this story hit different, drop a like and subscribe. I've got more stories coming that'll keep you up at night.